video 2 of the Maya interface series. I'm using Maya 2016. In the last video we talked about the menu bar. Now we're going to talk about this next bar up here, which we call the status bar. We had talked about menu sets, how those change what menus you see in the menu bar. And before we get into detail on each one of these, you'll notice these vertical bars that has like a small triangle on it. Those are in between each section of buttons. It kind of divides them into categories. Those can be opened and closed. So if you click that, you can hide a section of icons if they just get in the way, or you just too much information, you don't want to see it, which is nice. Other thing before we get into this is that if you hover over these, they will tell you what they are, and sometimes they'll have even help links. I've noticed some even have videos, so I click that, and this kind of tells you in detail with a lot of other links in your Maya help. Great resource when you're learning Maya. So be aware of that. So let's start at the beginning. This first group we know is the menu sets. This is your file buttons. Common in every program. You have you create a new scene, open a scene, save. You have undo and redo. Also, some of these are found in your edit. You got redo, undo, and you have I think your open and new scene are going to be in your file. And you'll see that in Maya. A lot of these buttons will be in 3 different places just to make sure you can get to them. This next big area from here to here, even though it's 3 sections, all of it has to do with selections. Once we start building things in Maya and start clicking things, it can be frustrating if you're trying to click on a certain component and you can't. So this is these are different types of objects that you can toggle on or off so that you select them, or you can or can't select them. You have different modes. You have a hierarchy mode, you have a object mode and a component mode. You have selection masks. Right now I think I'm able to select about everything. Suppose I don't want to be able to select joints, or I don't want to be able to select curves. So all this has to do with selection. I'm going to close those out for the moment. Okay. This selection has to do with snapping. If you're moving an object and you want to snap to a grid line, or snap to a curve, or a point, or a surface, these can help you do that. The next is construction history, or input and output history. When you build an object, it comes with certain parameters that define that object, and those are known as inputs. For example, I create a polygon in the sphere, and I'm in the channel box, which is, you may be in an attribute editor. Make sure this rightmost icon is clicked, and you'll notice there's some things that define radius and subdivision, and I can edit those. But what I was getting at is, if that's turned off and I create a sphere again, it's not there. So what construction history allows you to do is, after you create it, and usually the parameters you see in the inputs are the ones you would see in the option box when creating it. For example, I go to create polygon primitive sphere option box, and I want you to note radius, divisions, height, axis. Okay, now with it turned on, I go here and click, and I look in the inputs. It has radius, subdivisions, height, and it allows me after the fact to, if I want to make the radius 3, I can input those directly, and but we'll get into that later. But know that that's the construction history. This next section we have is our render settings, and what you see on the screen, Maya is calculating in real time, but often the reason people use Maya is that you can do these really nice renders of your models using advanced algorithms for lighting and reflections and shadows and all sorts of neat things with advanced renderers. And that takes time and process, but you can once you have lights in a scene and set up materials and surfaces, that's where you would click to kind of see how those things are responding to your light setup and materials. There's an interactive preview render that allows you to see some changes as you make them to the object in real time, but we'll get to that later. Those are your rendering setups. And your last thing over here, these are things that control your sidebars here. This first one is your modeling toolkit. Lots of modeling tools in here. These can be found in other menus elsewhere. These are some of the most common ones. This is fairly new. I think this is new in either Maya 14 or 16, but great new tool. This is your attribute editor. Once you have an object, you can select it and it'll list all of the attributes. Now, if you take the attribute editor and condense it to some of the most basic and keyable attributes, that's where you get the channel box, which is this one here. So it has your translate, which has to do with the moving. It has your rotation, which I can change that, and your scale. And these are things that can be keyframed, also your visibility. This is the input node section in your channel box that we talked about. We already closed it up. And also in your channel box, so we have the list of basic keyable attributes, we have inputs, and we also have a couple of sections where you can organize layers and animation and render layers. Just make a mental note there of, don't feel like you have to completely understand these things right now, but that's where they are. That's what this bar is. And in the next video, I want to introduce you to the shelf.